All right, let's dive right into this explainer, where we're going to unpack one of the most polarizing, heavily debated, and honestly, legally complex true crime cases in recent history. Now, look, if you've spent any time at all on social media over the last year, you've probably seen clips of the case we're about to explore. But as we're going to see today, what happens in the court of public opinion and what is actually allowed inside a court of law, well, those are two entirely different things.
I'm sorry we discovered a dead baby in the bathroom. Man, this chilling statement from a doctor, which was captured so vividly on police body cam footage, just sent absolute shockwaves across the internet when it went viral. I mean, you can practically feel the tension in the room just hearing those words, right? It is the exact moment a 19-year-old girl is confronted with a truly unimaginable accusation, all while she's just lying there in a hospital bed.
But that brings us to a massive legal paradox. Think about it. If millions of people have already watched this highly incriminating video on YouTube and TikTok, why won't the jury ever be allowed to see it? To understand exactly why the New Mexico Supreme Court just handed down a massive ruling, literally throwing out the most crucial piece of evidence in a first-degree murder trial, we really have to look closely at what happened that night. So, picture this. At 19 years old, high school cheerleader Alexee Trevizo arrives in an emergency room in the rural community of Artesia, New Mexico. It's the middle of the night, January 27, 2023. She's complaining of severe 10 out of 10 lower back pain, which she tells medical staff she thinks might just be an injury from cheer practice earlier that day. She completely denies being pregnant and tells them she is currently on her period.
Now, this timeline right here is absolutely crucial. The defense's entire argument hinges on this incredibly tight window. At 12:18 a.m., Alexee is given an anti-inflammatory and a muscle relaxer. 10 minutes later, at 12:28 a.m., they run a standard pregnancy test. By 12:51 a.m., the hospital confirms she is in fact pregnant, but, and get this, she is never informed of this result. Instead, the nursing staff keeps administering IV medications, eventually including the powerful narcotic morphine, for almost an hour after they knew she was pregnant. It actually isn't until 1:39 a.m. that her IV is finally stopped because she says she urgently needs to use the restroom.
So surveillance footage catches Alexee literally running to the bathroom for a reported bowel movement. She stays locked inside for nearly 20 minutes. During that time, her mother knocks on the door, the nurses knock on the door to check on her, but no medical professional actually enters the room. So as you can see, a massive, life-altering event occurs behind that closed door without a single drop of medical intervention. Inside that hospital bathroom, a full-term baby boy was delivered.
The immediate aftermath is where things rapidly escalate from a medical emergency into a full-blown criminal investigation. First, Alexee leaves the bathroom, walks right back to her hospital bed, and doesn't tell a soul what just happened. Next, a doctor performs a pelvic exam and discovers significant bleeding, but is still entirely unaware of the birth. Finally, hospital cleaning staff are sent into the bloody bathroom, where they discover the infant in a trash can, completely concealed underneath a fresh, clean plastic liner. Just a minute later, the baby is officially pronounced dead. So, following this horrific discovery, a state medical examiner steps in to perform an autopsy. They actually find morphine in the infant's bloodstream, which was a direct result of those IV medications administered to Alexee. However, the state medical examiner ruled the manner of death a homicide. They determined the baby died of entrapment due to being placed inside a plastic bag in that trash can. And really, this specific autopsy finding laid the absolute groundwork for the severe criminal charges that followed.
Okay, so we've got two starkly contrasting narratives here, and to truly understand how these legal strategies are clashing, we have to look at this completely impartially. The state's theory, they argue Alexee actively hid her pregnancy, that the baby was born alive, and that by placing him in the trash can, she committed first-degree murder and evidence tampering. But the defense's theory is entirely different. They argue she had absolutely no idea she was pregnant, she was heavily drugged with morphine by the hospital staff, and the baby was actually stillborn as a direct result of the hospital's severe negligence.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Doctor-patient privilege. This concept forms the entire bedrock of the New Mexico Supreme Court's massive legal reversal in this case. Doctor-patient privilege is this deeply rooted legal protection. It basically ensures that when you seek medical treatment, the highly private information you share with your doctor cannot be weaponized against you in a courtroom later on. It exists to encourage completely honest communication, so a patient gets the proper care without fear.
And boom, this is exactly where that privilege collides head-on with police procedure. After the baby was found, the police were called. But before the police ever read Alexee her Miranda rights, her doctor walked straight into her room with deputies standing right behind him and confronted her. a district court judge who, as a fascinating little side note, actually used to be a nurse before she became a judge, ruled that this confrontation was a deliberate ambush. The judge flat out stated it was shockingly confrontational and specifically designed by the medical staff to elicit an incriminating response while the police just stood by and watched.
Of course, the state prosecutors fought back. They argued that because police officers and Alexee's mother were physically in the room during the confrontation, her medical privacy rights were just automatically waived. But the New Mexico Supreme Court, they totally rejected that idea. They stated super clearly that just because third parties happen to be present, it doesn't instantly evaporate your medical confidentiality, especially in an emergency room setting where the patient has literally no control over who walks through the door.
So here is the absolute kicker. All of this highly publicized evidence is now completely thrown out. It is legally suppressed. That viral police body cam video of the confrontation, gone. The hospital surveillance video of her running to the bathroom, out. Literally everything Alexee said to the doctors, the nurses, and the police officers that night, tossed out. In the eyes of the law, because her rights were violated, absolutely none of this footage or testimony legally exists for the purpose of her trial.
Which creates a pretty fascinating legal hurdle. If the viral video, which is essentially the state's smoking gun, is completely off the table, how on earth do they proceed with a first-degree murder case? Well, prosecutors have publicly stated they are absolutely pressing forward. This just means their entire strategy has to shift. Instead of relying on a taped, tearful confession, they are going to have to rely heavily on objective science. We're talking autopsy results, physical evidence found in the bathroom, and the strict testimony of medical experts to prove the baby was actually born alive. But wait, because the defense isn't just playing defense here, they are flipping the script entirely. They filed a civil lawsuit against the hospital for wrongful death, pointing the finger squarely at the medical staff's negligence. They are arguing that failing to inform a 19-year-old she was pregnant, continuously pumping her full of dangerous narcotics like morphine, and then failing to monitor her when she locked herself in a bathroom rendered her completely medically and mentally incompetent to make any rational decisions whatsoever that night. Now, as the gears of the legal process slowly grind on, you might be wondering, where is Alexee right now? Well, she remains out on pretrial release. However, she's confined largely to her home under some very strict conditions. According to her attorney, she is actually attending university full-time virtually, mostly because severe mob threats to her safety made it impossible for her to step onto a physical campus. She's followed all of her house arrest rules without a single violation so far, and that civil malpractice suit we just talked about, that's been officially paused until the criminal trial concludes.
And speaking of that criminal trial, 2027. Let that sink in. That is the year her defense attorney realistically expects this polarizing, incredibly complex, first-degree murder trial to actually take place. Talk about the wheels of justice turning slowly, right? It's a pretty stark reminder of just how incredibly drawn out the system can be, especially when evidence has to go all the way up to a state Supreme Court for review.
So as we wait for this unprecedented trial to unfold literally years from now, it really leaves us with one incredibly fascinating question. Can a jury truly unsee what they've already seen? When millions upon millions of people have watched a suppressed body cam video and formed their absolute opinions through social media gossip, how does the justice system guarantee a fair trial using only the strictly permitted evidence? It's a profound question about how justice even operates in the age of viral internet outrage, and you can bet it's something we'll all be watching very, very closely.